Hello, everybody. This is Catherine Schmitt. I am your presenter for today for our year-end webinar on payroll. Some of you may already know me because of a stage support, and now you can finally put a face to the name and the voice. So your microphones are going to be muted. And if anybody has any questions, you can post them in our Q&A section. We will try and answer them midstream if we have time, and also at the end. Otherwise, we will put them in the Q&A, and then once we post this on our community hub, you can go ahead and access them there and see what we've said. All right. Today we are going to give you a demonstration on whether archiving and closing payroll is good for you. I will give you a demo on how to close payroll. I'll also give you a demonstration on how to advance your default posting period, how to update payroll calculations, and we have a question about the big beautiful bill, which will be included in that. In order to do your year end, things to consider are, have you installed the year end, your most recent release, which at this time is 27.2. We will have the new one later on, but we do want you to have the most recent one before. You should have completed all your final payroll for 25 and posted. If you've done any current payroll, we just want it to be in open status because we don't want anything for the new year included in that. Do you use a third party for payment of sick or disability? And do you record this on your W-2? You need to make sure that is entered. You want to make sure you close payroll before any new payroll is entered. That is better if you're than what I mentioned earlier anyway. Do you need to retain any year-to-date totals when you close the year, like loans, garnishments, etc.? You want to make sure you change the maximums. You need to verify any calculation rates and limits for the new year for when we go in and change the calculations. Usually you will get some kind of information about that. We do not know what your rates and limits should be. You do want to apply the year-end update, although at this time we don't know for sure when it will be. Usually it's the third week. We will announce the update on the Community Hub, and there is a link there on how to be able to get a notification from that. Okay, now here is which one is best for you. A couple versions ago, 24.2, our programmers added where you can have multiple payroll years. The reason you might want to do that allows you to keep payroll records in the database so that you can run a report for a couple of years. Specifically, that is for workers' comp. It allows you to go in and run a report and have maybe the beginning of 24 through the beginning of 25, or the middle of 24 through the middle of 25. The next thing is it is much faster. It literally can only take about 30 seconds when you close it. You cannot delete, this is one of the cons, a calculation that has been used in that closed year. So for instance, if you only close 25 and there's a calculation that you don't use anymore, but you did use it in 25, you cannot remove it as long as that year is still there. You can archive at any time. So if you decide 6 months later that you would like to, that is no problem. It also allows you to report across multiple years, as I mentioned. Now, as far as archiving, you can go ahead and when you do that, it will remove all of the payroll records for that year only in your archive. At that point, you can then go back to your payroll calculations and remove anything that you have used in that year, but you are not using anymore. You do have to archive in the database admin, which is on the server. So usually only your IT guy is able to do that. You can remove employees that are in laid of, quit, terminated, deceased, or retired. However, if they're related to job costs and that job is still open, you cannot remove them because there is what we call a reference to them. However, you can make them inactive so that you can't use them anymore. We do have links to how to be able to do all that. And it also mentions your multi-payroll year if you need more information on that. All right, so let's go ahead and get a demonstration about how to close your payroll. This is my company that has current payroll in it right now. So you're going to go into 538 and close payroll. And at this time, I don't have any other years in there. So when I click on close payroll, it says you're about to close payroll for calendar year 25. Do you want to continue? Yes. Watch how quick it is. Come on. And is it done? Now look at this. That's how quick it was. It doesn't even give you a spinner. But when you try and do it again, it says, by the way, you're getting ready to process payroll for 26. Reminder, be sure to update your payroll calculation. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click OK and then get out of there. Now, at this point, here's what it does when you close payroll. If you go to an employee and look at their calculations, you'll notice there is nothing over here. When you close payroll, it resets all of your numbers. Your payroll for 25 is still there. Get this larger. And it even has some older stuff in there. But at that point, you can edit only 1 year back. So in other words, if I wanted to go back into 24 and edit that, it wouldn't allow me to. Once I start entering 26, and I can go back and edit 25 for whatever reason, but 26 is now able to be in there. Okay. It also shows there is no earnings for this year yet because we haven't started doing 26. Okay. And like I said, if you want to archive, you cannot archive from this screen. You have to open up database admin and do it from there. And it's always going to be archive oldest payroll. Okay. All right, let's go back over here. Now, this is when you want to go ahead and start your new payroll and post it to period 1. So for instance, what mine is set up to right now is period 2. I'm going to go back. No, I don't want to do that. I want to change it back to 1. And hang on a second. And we're going to put it back to 1. Okay. Now, at that point, if I say I want to go ahead and change it, and it would be 26, not 25. I just haven't gone forward, but that's okay. It's going to go through an audit, and I don't have any. I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a second. But right now it says, do you want to advance the default posting period to 2? If I was in 12, I could go ahead and go to 1. But I'm going to show you what it looks like if you have audit errors. So let's go ahead and change your company. You're going to get an error message if you try and change it. All right. so let's go back over here. Okay, so this right now, well, that's really old, but don't worry about it. You get the same message. If I try and change it to 1, what comes up, it says it found an error. Do you want to print the report? I'm going to say no, but it says this. Recalculating might remove those errors. Do you want to do that now? Yes. I already know it isn't going to remove my error. So again, I'm going to say no. But it says unable to advance. Audit errors were detected. So you need to have them fixed before you can go over to 1. However, when you go ahead and try and do a journal entry or a transaction or anything, even though it still says 12, you are allowed to change that to your next year and they will be available. But that's real important. You do want to get those audit errors fixed because otherwise it will not let you move forward. So that's something that, because it needs to have a file fix and you have to have that scheduled, you want to try and get that done as soon as possible. So that way we don't have to worry about it, because otherwise you may be waiting a little bit longer than you expect for that. Okay. And again, we do have, I have a link on there, so it explains how to be able to fix that. Okay. Now, this is for how to update your payroll calculations. As I said earlier, we don't, a second, because I got to get, there we go. We don't know your rates. What we do know is that when you install the latest payroll update for the year-end tax table, it is going to put a message in there. So since I have closed payroll, I'm going to show you what that message is. We're going to go to Social Security. We only do it for Social Security and Medicare. Okay. So for instance, right now I have probably from last year right in there. If I try and save it, it says, reminder, the maximum amount of wages subject to employee, and this is for employee and employer, for last year was 176.1. Once you get the 26 tax table entered, this will change and it'll give you a new rate. And then it said, do you want to save? I'm going to say no, because you do need to change the maximum amount. And then for the employees, you're going to go options, save and update employees, default rate and maximum, just in case they have changed the rate. At this point, we don't know. So we're going to go ahead and say all employees, because in most cases, every single employee does have that. Okay. Once you do that, it says all employees will be updated. We're going to go ahead and say yes. And it gives us that message because, again, I haven't changed my rate, but I don't care. Do you want to say yes? And it tells you how many employees will be changed. Okay. So Social Security is the only one that we will do that with. Okay. Medicare at this point has not changed its rate, but we don't know if they will for next year. Federal income tax, you do not have to. By the way, I want to mention one thing. This link will tell you which items normally have to be updated. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an idea. Okay, hang on 1 second. Yeah, it's one thing with Windows 11. They if you have a screen open, let's see if we can just want that. Yes, there we go. Okay, so I'll open it up twice just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so I just want to make sure that, oh, go over to this one. The calculations that need to be updated are normally unemployment, They usually have a maximum. Federal employment might. I haven't seen any changes on that for some time. SDI disability might. Workers' comp, they may change your rates. That is not done here. That's done under the table in 532. So once you've changed those, then you can go ahead and start doing payroll. Normally, you want to have those changed and the latest tax table updated before you do any new payroll. You can go backwards, but it's easier to just go ahead and do that. All right. So let's get back over here. All right. Cancel that. Yep, and I lose my mouse. Okay. There we go. All right. So we've updated the calculations and okay. Is like in a, it doesn't like what it's doing. Okay. All right. Why isn't it letting me go forward? Because I have another one open. Get out of there and let's try it again. So one of the things that I did want to mention that went along with the updating the payroll calculations is that we have the big beautiful bill. And at this point, we are going to add any changes that are in related to overtime in the software. That is the other reason why you need to get the latest update. Because at this point, it does not address it. And so if you aren't willing to update, you will need to figure out how to be able to pull in that overtime yourself. We are going to, and we just found out about from our developers that they were going to add it into our latest version. Okay. Now, this is something that you may run into when you are getting ready to close payroll. Right before you do that, you might want to go into (537), which is your payroll audit, and click repair. And now if you'll notice, this is one of the things I want you to be aware of. When you've closed payroll, you get two options. One is to do the prior year, and the other one, without checking that, is going to do the current year. Because I want everybody to see what this year, 2025, is like, we're going to click that. Then you go ahead and do repair, and it says employee totals will be calculated from payroll records. We're going to say we want to continue. It goes through all the employee records and then runs an audit. And it found an audit error. So we're going to preview that and see what it shows us. And usually it will give you, let's maximize that. Ugh. Hate it when I hit the wrong screen. Okay. So this shows one employee that didn't have third party, but the employee record shows sick party. This is one of the things I was talking about earlier. If you mark the employee as having third party, you do need to make sure you enter that from the insurance company that's paying him. But that's the only error that we have. I'm not going to show how to fix it. We do have an article link that shows you how to fix payroll auditors. Okay. Once you've done the repair, you really should close after the fact. So I did them kind of out of order, but we weren't sure how much time we were going to have. Um, so let's go back to here. So we have both Social Security, and for the Canadian version, we also have CPP. Okay. Um, at this point, because we are a little bit ahead, I just want to verify. Do we have any questions in the Q&A? Cody, you can answer me by a chat if you want.
I we've got one question, maybe just to clarify again.
Okay.
I'm going to publish that now. To clarify, the year-end update will automatically pull OT reporting required by the big beautiful bill into 2025 W2 reporting.
So that's so the question was, is the OT going to be pulled into the W-2? That was one of the things I wasn't sure about, since as I said, we did just find out about it. We don't know what's going to happen with it. What we do know is going to be addressed in the year-end update. The release notes will tell us exactly what's going to happen with that. Um, Prior to that, we thought maybe we were going to have to do some kind of a query and then enter credit or whatever. At this point, we really don't know. Hopefully, we'll have more information in the next week or two. So that's the other reason why you want to register for notifications, because that way, whenever we put something on Community Hub to update, you will get an email about that. Okay. Um, and also, as far as, let's go to the next screen, your tax forms. I'm not going to show you each one. I'm just going to do a generalized how to print them. We have both the US and the Canadian version. So for instance, the US will print W-2s and 1099s, and it doesn't matter what your fiscal year, the 1099 is done by January to December. Canadians will be T4s and 5018s, same scenario. And so all you have to do is click the link to show how to do that. So very quickly, if we go over to, oh, come on. So let's see, I can, all right. So let's PowerPoint again. Okay. I should be able to go back. All right, hang on 1 second. We're going to close this screen and my other one. And then that way I won't have a problem. Okay. Now, let me show you. Okay. So when you are ready to print them, all you have to do is go into 541, and this applies again for both the US and the Canadian version. You pick what you're going to print out of here. Um, there's your W-2 right there, and it automatically shows default to whatever period. And then you go ahead and run the report. The article that we have on the PowerPoint will show you how to be able to do that. And then if you have read that information and still don't understand, go ahead and contact us. But those usually do help you, because they'll go through step by step what you need to do. You can order those forms if you prefer directly from Sage. One of the things I will tell you is that a lot of people will go to the office supply stores and buy them, and they'll get the 3-part. We do not do tax forms on the 3-part. They're all what they call 4-up, which comes directly from the IRS or the CRA. So you want to make sure you're using those forms. Otherwise, you're just going to do them either by hand or buy the new ones and do them again. All right. Now, if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and post them. We will go ahead and try and answer them if we can, if we have time. But at this point, I have gone through everything I can think of. Let me just go back. By the way, there is, again, there's a link to our year-end center, which has all kinds of articles, checklists. How do you do this in that particular website? I think I've covered pretty much everything. Okay. All right. So any questions that I can answer at this point?
I've got a few piled up here. I'm have someone asking about how to sign up for the community hub. I'm going to include a link to our knowledge base article that has a video guide, as
Okay.
well as links and descriptions on everything you need to know about getting signed up for the community hub. So you'll see that post here in a second.
And I thought there was also a post on here or a link on how to start your subscribe to the community hub. And let me see if it was at the beginning. Might have been at the very beginning. It was, yes. It's about on slide 4. There actually is a link underneath. We announce updates on how to subscribe. And basically, once you click on that, it'll tell you exactly what to do. And like I said earlier, once you have subscribed, every time we update, whether we have a tax table, whether we have changed something, whether we've added something in that new version, you will get an email showing that, and then you can download directly from there. And you may need to have your IT do it, or if you can do it yourself.
I have 2 questions here.
Okay.
Will the new 401k limits be addressed in the new update?
Well, so what we do with the 401k updates is that's one of the things that you actually have to change in your where you start updating everything. And I can't get my screen back. So for instance, when you're going through and you're updating all the information, we just got to hear, there we go. When you are updating all the calculations, the 401k is the one thing that you have to add what the maximum is. So in other words, we don't put a message, we don't add that yourself. All you have to do is go into 531 like I was showing you, change whatever the maximum is, and then that way anybody who hits that max, depending on how you have it set up, it'll stop computing or deducting automatically.
All right. Thank you for that. I have one other question here. How many
Okay.
years can you have payroll closed before you actually need to start archiving?
So the question is, how many years of payroll? Funny thing is, we haven't even been told yet. So far, we have not run into a problem. I think there are some data sets that actually have at least 3 years. Some people even have it back to 23. We have not run into a problem. What we always tell people, just like with the fiscal, it all depends on how many employees you have and how much data you have. If it seems to be slowing down your program, that's when you probably want to archive. And you always archive the oldest year anyway, whether you do it by payroll or whether you do it by fiscal, or because you may have the latest update installed, you can now do it all at one time like we used to do. So if everything is running fine, let it ride. You don't need to change anything. The only reason you might need to change anything at all is if there's some employees that didn't get deleted because there was information on them, You might want to go ahead and archive both fiscal and payroll, because that way it'll get rid of any references to them. And then you can finally get rid of them. Otherwise, like I said earlier, you will have to go ahead and create them as inactive. Make them inactive. Okay,
right.
somebody's got her hand up. What's her question? Might need to post it in Q&A so we can
Yep.
hear it.
I've got some good questions here. And all right, so these are more questions kind of like about the making sure about the payroll order of operations. Do we have to close the payroll year and advance the posting period prior to changing all rates and calculations for 2026?
So the question is, do you have to advance, close, and change kind of all at one time? So you don't need to change before you close. You can go ahead and change all your rates after you close, but I will tell you that if you go ahead and change your rates and then run a repair and close, you're going to have an error message, because then it'll look like you haven't done enough Social Security. So changing the rates is probably for sure what you want to do before you do any payroll for next year. Okay. Closing payroll, for sure you want to go ahead and do that before you start any new payroll. Okay. And posting all of your payroll, you definitely need to do that before you close. As far as advancing your to the period 1, as long as you are able to post into period 12, no, you don't need to do that until after you close payroll, because you're not going to be posting any payroll in period 1 before you close anyway. If you do, then you're really going to have a problem. And that's something that will have to be fixed.
All right. We have a question here. If you close the payroll instead of archiving, are the errors gone?
No, the only way that, if you're talking about payroll auditors, the only way the payroll auditors will go away is if you fix them. Now, there are some, depending on what you've done. So for instance, when you have the calculation set at one rate, but the employee is set at the correct rate, you're going to get an error that says employee maximum does not match calculation maximum. This is one of the reasons why you want to do the maximum on the calculation and then update the employees, because that way everybody matches, including your old people. We have seen it where somebody has made somebody inactive, or maybe they don't work anymore, so they'll only do it with current employees. No, that's definitely going to cause an error. Do it with all the employees, just in case maybe they come back, or you made them inactive because they were terminated or passed on or whatever. You're still going to get an error if you don't say all employees. So it is better to go ahead and do that.
All
Okay.
right. I've got a question here. How do you prevent prior year payroll records from being modified after year-end reports are completed?
Well, again, if you're talking about only the prior year, you actually don't. So in other words, when you close, maybe a prior year needs to be changed because maybe the job was wrong or the pay rate was wrong or something like that. Hopefully it's not back too far. You can go ahead and fix that, and you should. However, if somebody is just going in and changing that willy-nilly, then no, they really shouldn't be able to anyway. Maybe they're not part of the payroll group, or maybe they're not a payroll admin. I mean, there's a couple of ways you can go ahead and lock them out of it so that you don't have to worry about that. But once it becomes another year, you can't edit them anyway. The program won't let you, won't even let you save.
Okay. All right, thank you. So a follow-up question about the 401k. Beginning in 2026, catch-up contributions must be made on a Roth basis for highly paid individuals. This new definition
Right.
for HPI is a participant who earned more than 145,000 in FICA wages in 2025. So, yeah, I guess that's the rate that they're kind of wanting to make sure they're
Right. So again, at this point, we don't know if that's something that is going to be included in the program. It may be that we're just going to have to go ahead and watch it. At this point, we know that that maximum was for prior year. So if that's something that's included in payroll next year, again, we have no information about what's being done until they actually release it. It's like one of the reasons they don't tell us what's going to happen is because it may be pulled at the last minute. We don't want to let you guys know that, oh, by the way, yes, it's going to be in there. And then we find out, no, it's not. So you will know about the same as we. As soon as that is released, check the release notes and see if there's anything in there that mentions that. They usually let us know if there's a change in one of the calculations and the way it does, especially when there are new IRS rules that control it. So at this point, you know as much as we do.
All right. And I had someone ask about the forms. I'm including a link to the Sage CREforms.biz where
Correct.
you can get those forms. And so many great questions today.
And somebody else
all
has
right.
their hand up. So again, Susan, since we can't turn the mics on, if you want to go ahead and post that.
Yep, I see. Okay. Someone is asking about when the update will be released. Third week of December.
We think sometimes it may
Oh,
be a
yeah.
little bit earlier, sometimes it may be later. It all depends on when we get the information from the IRS. If it's anything like last year, they didn't even notify us until almost the first week of January. And we cannot do anything usually until they give us the information, at which point we'll add any new changes, then we'll go ahead and release it. Sometimes we have seen they'll go ahead and release the information, but then they get new changes and they'll put a new one out right in January. So again, keep an eye out for that. But we haven't heard when the exact date it will be released.
Sometimes we close a year and then in the third week of the month, we get a statement that someone was paid short-term disability in December of the prior year. How do we correctly enter that in a closed year so we can report it on the W-2s? Do we have any articles about that subject?
Yes, that article is specific to how do you correct a payroll record when the employee's already been given it. And because it is a prior year, it will allow you to change it. And as long as you catch it, well, let's hope you catch it before you do the W-2s. Absolutely, you can correct it, then do the W-2s correctly. However, if you send them out and find out later, you can still correct it. The only difference is now you're going to have to do an edit to W-2 for the employee.
All right. Thank you. And I do see several people asking about the PowerPoint slides that we're showing. Those will be included in the Community Hub post whenever we post the video and the answers to the Q&A questions.
Yes. In fact, it's probably going to take a couple days before we get that uploaded. It will be on the Community Hub, at which point you can go ahead and access it there, listen to it. It'll be exactly the way we talked about today, and then you'll be able to see the question and answers at that point.
Here is a great question about filing with Atrix. if you file your W-2s and 1099s electronically through Atrix, do you need to still print anything on the special tax forms?
As far as I know, no, but I'm not a payroll clerk. I'm not an Atrix
All
expert,
right.
so I can't really tell you. However, what I do know is that when you e-file with Atrix, they take care of everything, meaning if your employee has signed for an electronic W-2, they will go ahead and email it. If they didn't, they'll send it to them on paper. So they literally take care of the federal, the state, the employee copy. All you need are your own copies that you print out and hang on to. So that's why someone likes to do the e-file, because you don't have to worry about spending money on any of that stuff.
All right. Thank you. And gosh, like I said, we've got lots of great questions here. I'm trying to get,
Pick some of the best ones.
yeah, picking the best ones. All right. I have a person asking generally, Atrix is for U.S. Companies?
And Canada.
Yeah, in Canada as well? Okay, yeah. So yeah, just a customer asking generally what Atrix is and
Sorry, Cody.
oh yeah, what's the
Atrix is
elevator
actually,
pitch?
yeah, Atrix is actually software that we've been using for a couple of years now. It's really easy because it saves you from having to worry about doing your own stuff manually. You literally go in and 541 and 542 is where you usually get the information from. There's all kinds of forms that they have. I will tell you, usually starting about now, I haven't gotten messages, so I'm not real sure. They will do an update on a regular basis on their forms. And that's because in their list of forms, they have all the US ones and all the Canadian ones. So depending on what version you have, you're only going to see that version of forms. So the Canadians won't see anything with US and vice versa. Once you go ahead and go in there and fill out your form, whether you decide to print it or have them do it, you have both options. And so all you do is do everything with them, just follow the steps. They have a help in there, just like we do. Hit the question mark and it'll tell you exactly how to fill out the forms. If you have any problems with them, they also have a contact. So you don't have to contact us when it's related to Atrix, unless you can't even get into there or you get a Sage error. Otherwise, everything was with them. You can just pick one if you want, Cody.
So this one is it's a little specific, but it might be something that people will see whenever they're working on their audits. Customers asking about an error that they'll see about the quarter on a payroll record not matching the check date on the record.
Correct. Now, there's a good reason for why that happens. It's a perfect scenario. So let's suppose you're actually doing payroll right now. You probably don't have to worry about it. However, it usually happens at the very end of one quarter. So example, let's say you were working in the third quarter at the end of September. Okay, but the check isn't actually being written until the 1st of October, 1st or 2nd. You start doing the time cards and the program knows the check date. It automatically fills it in on whatever you're working at which point it also automatically fills in the quarter. So for 9:30 or 9:29, it thinks the quarter is going to be 3. Well, then you come back and you're saying, okay, I'm going to final compute this and now I'm going to print that check. But the check is now going to have October 1 or 2 on it. And you forget to go in and change the quarter date, the quarter number. When you run a repair, the program thinks they belong to quarter 3. Now, here's what's bad about that. When you run your 941 for quarter 4, those checks are not included. And then you wonder why your federal tax report doesn't match your 941. That's why. You always want to run a payroll repair before either of those. That way, if you have that message, it gives you a record number. All you have to do is go back to the record number, change a quarter, and then run your reports again. And then you're good to go.
All right. Thank you for answering that.
And we did find that they are publishing the questions also about now, but like we said, they won't be uploaded for a couple days. Okay. Is there anything we haven't covered that is important to payroll? Let me go back and look at our topics. One thing I do want to mention that I touched on, but I didn't really cover, is third party. So one of the things we were talking about is if you have somebody who is out on third party sick, they have an insurance company who's actually paying their wages, their Social Security, not the employer's Social Security, and their Medicare. Also, maybe federal and state. We do have some information in here about it. However, what you need to do, the insurance company will normally send you a notice on how much they paid. And all you have to do is enter that in the payroll record that it is third party and how much your insurance company paid. We will then cover it correctly on the W-2. But if it's not entered, they won't know anything about that. So that's what that is about.
Okay. Yeah, this, I know this is a question that I've come across with customers. The payroll end date for a pay period could be, for example, December 27th. However, the check date is January 1st and in 2026. That's just want to clarify that the check date is in 2026, so it's a 2026 payroll check. It's not going to be part of their 2025 payroll.
Correct. And also the reason that is because the IRS is the one that governs the liability. And so if you've got next year's date on it, they consider that next year quarter 1. So doesn't matter if your pay period ends this year. If you're doing it next year, it is next year's payroll. By the way, there was something about the W-2s that we wanted to cover real quick. First of all, we are not going to be physically changing any of the W-2s. Okay. And the big beautiful bill does need to have information from the employers as far as how much OT they made so that they can put it on their forms. The IRS has announced a transition period for this year, but we're not going to be doing anything to W-2s even in the latest update. OT is covered.
All right.
We have a little bit more information about that a little bit later that we can put in an article.
I have a good question here. With regards to third-party sick pay, since they only take out the employee SSI and Medicare, not local taxes, how do we account for the local and the employer SSI and Medicare?
Wait a minute. Say that again?
So, yeah, with regards to third-party sick pay,
Right.
since they only take, and the person posted here, EE, Social
Employee.
Security,
Right.
yeah, the employee, Social Security, SSI, and Medicare.
Okay.
They and they don't take the local taxes. How do we account for the local and the employer SSI and Medicare?
Okay, so that's what I was talking about earlier. You have to create a payroll record. They'll tell you, the insurance company will tell you how much they actually took out. You will enter how much wages, how much employees, Social Security, Medicare, and because they did not take any federal, state, or local taxes, you're not going to put that on there. You are going to enter employer side so that you can pay the liabilities on it. We have when you say it's a third party, and that is part of the tax heading, when you post it, the program knows how to handle it. It does not include the employee, Social Security, and Medicare as part of your liability, but they are entered on the W-2 as third party, and the employer is entered so you can get expenses for that. That's also on the 941. There's a box there. Did you have any third party? So all that is covered correctly also. And like I said, we do have an article about third parties, so you can go ahead and search for that, and it'll explain how that's done.
All right, thank you for that. And we've got that answered. And I do see several people mentioning payroll audit errors. We do have specific articles for the US and Canadian payroll errors. I will post links to those guides on the questions in the Q&A.
Right. And they're fairly self-explanatory. You literally can follow the steps on that, but we understand if you need to contact us because they can be kind of confusing.
I have one here that says, my payroll audit errors are very specific to exceptions made to apply some Canadian payroll rules. So they're not, in fact, errors. How do I go about that?
So
yeah, the Canadian payroll audit errors, we do have an article that covers those specifically.
right. And so, first of all, the Canadian payroll auditors are almost the same as the US. In other words, the only thing you're going to see on that is the CPP for employee and employer. You might have the CPP2 if it hasn't been computing all year, the EI, employee and employer. That's all we have on there. But you may also see that your quarter doesn't match a check date. Because even though you don't have to do a 941, so it may not be as important, you may still get that message. Okay. And your maximums, that message may still come up because you may have one last year's maximum on the calculation, but not correct on the employee or vice versa. So read the error message and see exactly what it says. And the article that we have linked will tell you again exactly how to fix them.
All right. We have here where do we enter the third-party sick pay information?
Okay, that's really easy. So let me just show you real quick. So you create a payroll record. Well, first of all, let me just show you one area. This is the employee. They have to have it on there. So On the compensation tab, there's a little box right down here for third-party sick pay. So that was the message I was showing you earlier. If somebody has it marked, but they do not have a payroll record that is set up as third-party here, then you're going to get an error message when you go to run the payroll repair. And all the third party will let you do is calculations. So that's where you'll go ahead and pick the employee amount that the insurance company did, the Medicare amount, and the employer amount. And when you post it, like I said, the employer side is the only one that's going to go to liabilities because they've already paid everything and you don't need to worry about it. Okay, their wages will go right up here in salary. You're not going to do anything on the time card. It has, in fact, if you notice, it's grayed out. You can't. Okay, has nothing to do with the job, which is why it's only on the calculation tab. And then once you fill in that information and post it, it goes over the ledger. And then when you do your W-2, it's in there at third party. If you'll also notice, there is no computed on it, because you don't need to worry about trial compute. You're typing in the numbers yourself. Okay, and that's all you have to do with that. Okay, and I think we're very close to closing out.
Mhm.
If anybody has any other questions, go ahead and post them to the Q&A. We will go ahead and try and answer as many as we can, and then we will publish it. And once everything is taken care of, we have all the answers, we will go ahead and put the whole webinar on the community hub so that you can go ahead and download it, listen to it whenever you want to, and look at the Q&A yourself.
Yeah,
Right.
and one last thing that I know that can be kind of a little confusing for the customers. Some customers are asking about if 27.2 is the year-end release and if that's what they need to have installed before they do payroll, close out the payroll.
27.2 is actually what we are right now. 27.2.188, I think. The new version is probably going to be another iteration of 27, but it might be 0.2 and another number. It may be 0.3. Again, we won't know until it's actually been released. The reason we mention that is that is the very latest one that was out. A lot of the clients that we see had last year's update, which was 26.3. And so you can update from there. They are cumulative, which means that even though we've had about 3 or 4 new releases this year, this new update is going to include everything. So it's not like you have to do what I call a hop, skip, and a jump. You can literally update and you'll get everything in between. You can even do that if you are at version 24.25. It's still going to give you the same information. You will have missed a lot of it, which is why you want to go over here to Home and Resources and what's new. And then at the end of it, it takes you back to all the previous versions and gives you information on what we updated, what we fixed, that kind of thing, because we want you to understand exactly what's been going on. All right. So at that point, I am going to go ahead and close out. If anybody has any questions, please post them in the Q&A so we can answer them. I hope this helped you. All right. You all have a great day and Merry Christmas, everybody.